Good morning and welcome to the Blackbar podcast. My name's Nick Mayo. It's great to see you guys. In fact, I see you, Caleb. What's going on?
I also see me. Although
you know who I don't see?
We don't see any Zach because he hasn't been here.
Hey, it's me. I'm back.
I'm
back. It's been so long. Hey, it's Nork and Khalib. It's great to see you guys. I'm excited to be on the episode with you today. That's your names, right?
Maybe been too long.
Yep.
It's been so long.
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute.
Where you been, Zach? What have you been up to?
Well, I'm excited that I was able to get away today because there's a big announcement, and I announced it in Discord, I announced it on my social media, but, you know, wouldn't you know, not everyone follows both those things. You should follow the Discord, though, if you don't. I had an opportunity at the beginning of this year to take a new job. I wasn't looking for it. I've been at Lifehouse for about 9 years. My parents helped start Lifehouse like almost 20 years ago at this point. And the opportunity presented itself, and I took it. So Cross and Crown is the company that I'm now employed by. I'm starting there full-time this Monday, which is crazy. It's been a heck of a month and a half as I figured it out. So the cool thing is that they already have a relationship with Blackbar. So I know Blackbar is a media agency, Cross and Crown is a media agency, but it's more like this than like this, which is really exciting. There's some cool opportunities that we're going to have to work together. Those guys are awesome. Yeah. So it's just a really sweet season where I get to try something brand new. The only kicker is that it's a Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 job. So that makes it a little hard to make it to a bi-weekly Friday noon podcast. So we're figuring all that out, but I wanted to make sure to officially announce it today, and I was glad to, I was glad that I was able to get a little break today. So that's Zach, where I've been. I'm happy to be back, at least for this one.
I'm glad you're here, dude, and we're really proud of you. You know, Cross and Crown's a great partner. We've done some stuff with them in the past, and I know Caleb did your internship with Cross and Crown. So
I did.
We know the people over there. They're good people,
and he stayed at my parents' house, and my parents' neighbors had pigs and alligators and snakes. So Caleb got to experience all that Maryland has to offer.
I literally just never left the basement other than go to work, which is not too different than my life now. It's fine. It's great.
I mean, we don't need to just keep talking about me because that's the announcement, and I'm excited for you guys to see what comes from it. But we got a lot more in store today. So
yes,
yeah. Let me tell you guys what we got on the docket today. So first of all, let's bring in our guest today. JP Dorsey is here with us. Hey, JP, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Getting to hang out with 3 great people. Well, 2 and 1 I'm just getting to know. So we'll see.
Right. Jury's still out. We're still
I was going to say, of the person reveals, I fully left frame, but I think his reveal was still stronger than mine. So
was it strong?
Nice. I think so. I mean, just look at that amazing face you got going on there.
I gotta say, JP, I know we didn't talk about this beforehand, but I love your glasses. They are uniquely and specifically you, to the point where I may have gotten some similar frames because your style is just so iconic in my own mind.
Well, I think I just can't see when I don't have them on, and so they're big and clunky. Right. So when I have them on, I'm like, there they are. They're the giant black things sitting there on the table. That's really,
for those that are
survival.
Listening audio only. His glasses are very, very round, but they work really well for him. And Nick imitated that as well. They work for both of them. I think.
I love that we probably just weirded out JP. JP is probably like, oh my gosh, Nick, you're really weird, man. You're really weird.
Caleb's over there ready to cut the stream. Like, we will never have a professional guest on again. We will never. This is it. This is it.
Speaking of professional, right? JP, you've been for a while now. You were the president at North Point Bible College GR. That was about 3 years. You did that. You've done a lot of things within the pastoral world. I know specifically at Grand Rapids First, where Caleb and I worked, you preached on multiple Sundays. I remember being very excited for those. getting to hear from you. I'm really pumped and excited and so thankful that you chose to join us today, because I know that in my heart, you're a special person in a good way. I'll make sure that's clear. But JP, you're incredibly intelligent. You're incredibly knowledgeable. And I love and appreciate your ability to critically look at things. And I know our audience is in for a real treat today. To be able to hear from you while we talk about our two topics, which I'll get into, being Sora. OpenAI just created Sora, the text-based AI video generator, and then we're going to be tackling a bigger topic. Maybe not necessarily a bigger topic, but it's like, is social media good for society? I don't know. Maybe. We'll find out.
We'll see. Johnny Yip has just commented that this is his favorite White Guys with Glasses podcast. And that means a lot, because there's probably a lot of White Guys with Glasses podcasts.
There is a lot of White Guys with
category.
And JP has a beard too, so, right?
Am
I wrong about that?
It's just a little. Yeah. Right.
JP, was there anything I got wrong in your introduction there?
No.
Good. Rock solid.
I'm glad to hear that.
All right, why don't we jump into our first topic today? I will be taking the reins on this one. We've got a new AI tool to play with. We can't play with it yet, but we can watch other people play with it. And that is OpenAI's new Sora.
This is crazy.
And Sora is a video generation AI. We have heard sort of little rumblings of video generation AI. It's been very behind the scenes for a long time, and now we're finally getting to the point where we're seeing, I would say, very believable results out of this tool. This tool is not yet available to the public. It is made by OpenAI, which is the same company that makes ChatGPT, which is probably the most well-known AI tool, text to text at the moment. But the results that we are seeing out of this tool are just a little bit mind-blowing. We've seen a little bit of video generation in the past. Usually it has a really hard time with continuity, where things will change from frame to frame. Details will move. That seems to be a problem that is not entirely solved, I will say, from what I'm seeing, but definitely seems to be much, much better in these examples. You could see, even as in this example specifically, the camera dollies in, or has this cut to this very close frame, and still a lot of these details hold. That being said, some of it does change. If we go to the very beginning of the clip, you can see sort of the coat that she's wearing and the dress that she's wearing. And if we go to the very end of the clip, that's very much a different coat. It's similar, but it's different.
The dress a different color too, even? Like,
the dress is a different color, red, and it's got these black spots on it. So consistency isn't like perfect on this, but the range of shots that this is able to get, shots that are obviously not quite possible, like woolly mammoths, they're not quite running around anymore. We could have a movie trailer featuring the adventures of a 30-year-old spaceman wearing a red wool knitted motorcycle helmet is the prompt for this one, right?
Yeah.
I think what's most impressive about that one for me is the angles. They just cut to so many quick different angles that are seemingly consistent.
Right. And we're getting people that look like they're the same people across multiple different shots. It seems to do fantastic with landscape. This stuff, relatively speaking, the AI is pretty good at copying for the most part. But even stylized stuff, things that isn't supposed to look real. It's doing a fantastic job of it.
Yes.
Now,
terrifying.
Right. This tool is not yet at a point where, you're going to be able to just punch in a script and you're going to have your pastor just read off a script in exactly his or her voice. And you never have to shoot talking heads again. It's not getting anywhere to that. AI tools, the problem is, and probably will be for a while, prompt generation, getting the AI to actually understand what it is that you want out of it, and having, understanding how to control it in that way. But there are absolutely huge potential use cases for this kind of stuff. I've been seeing a lot of sensationalist stuff online of people blowing up about this as the end of the world or the most powerful tool that's ever dropped out. I'm curious how you all feel about this tool specifically.
Yeah, I'll tell you what.
Conflicted.
Yeah, conflicted
It's
faces for sure.
Yeah, it's a good tool, and that's how I'm looking at it right now. I don't think anyone's losing their job right now over it. I think it's going to be really important for us video makers and filmmakers to learn how to use this tool. There's a lot of things that I think AI video will enhance, but inherently must come from a actual camera on set in a place. I think of the whole wedding filmmaker area of business. Like, you're going to use AI to enhance, but you're not going to essentially go and say, hey, I need to show this wedding that's actually happening. Just make me the video and I won't even show up.
Yeah.
So I see it being a tool in our tool belt that's certainly going to make it more easier for us to do some things and more difficult for us to keep some jobs. So I know it was said in the past, as long as we're learning AI and staying up to date with the technology, I think a lot of us are going to be okay. But it's something, if we're not listening to and we're not keeping a close look on the heartbeat of, I think it's going to become problematic for us within the business. And that's not even touching some of the other things that could be very problematic with this.
For sure. Yeah, I think the person or the people that are most at risk is probably, I love ArtGrid and Artlist, royalty-free music and video generation. I think the people that are creating that content are most at risk in this because, like, let's say I have a video that I'm filming with a company about, I don't know, a product, like maybe this water bottle. I can now generate different scenes in which a water bottle is used or sequences that I don't have to pay for an ArtGrid subscription anymore. I just can generate custom what I want. And not only is it going to be exclusively me, but also it'll be something that no one else is going to have access to the exact version of again. So that's honestly the field that I think is most threatened by this. Not to say this isn't the beginning of something crazy of where it's going to go. So
Sure.
JP, how do you feel about Sora?
Oh man, well, I'm not the expert, but I guess having lived a little bit and seen these new technologies come on board, I think that the same people are always at risk, and those are people who have viewed their skill or their craft as a means to make a product rather than conduct something meaningful from one person to another. So whether you're talking about music, whether you're talking about visual arts, whether you're talking about content generation, it doesn't really matter. Even sermon creation, whatever it is, all across all those platforms, there have been technological innovations that have come along all the way since the 16th century that have improved each of those. And you have just people tend to be sorted into groups by, in a way, maybe a little bit of their character and interior life. Are they the kind of person who's looking to like generate the most content possible and like kind of hammer out or crush out a living? Or are they the kind of person who's like, man, I really want to be a part of something meaningful, and how can this help me do that? And I think you'll probably see the same sort of sorting process happen, where there will be people who will resist it, and it'll be good that they resist it, right? It's a tension. You'll have people who, if it's in the music world, they're going to lean even harder into singer-songwriter, authenticity, all that kind of thing, and it's going to provide attention on this. I think that's good. You'll have some people who view this as kind of a cheat code to the music, and those people probably will not be overly durable. And then you'll have other people who are already genuinely really creative people who will kind of sit in the middle and stride both those worlds. And they'll utilize both, and they'll take the sensibilities of the singer-songwriter who wants to say something and do something meaningful, but they'll use this new tool to do it, and they'll find a way to integrate. And I think that's probably true across all the platforms, whether it's sermon creation, whether it's whatever it is. You're going to find people in each of those three places, and the only one that probably is really at risk is the person who really has viewed themselves as a maker of product, rather than a crafts person in whatever their particular spheres. They're the ones who are at the most risk, I think, personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
totally
interesting.
agree.
I don't know if you guys are in the same boat, but I feel like my immediate circles, and maybe we'll get into this with our second topic today, the loudest are the ones that are scared, which is probably, a trend that's
You can say
probably
that's a
most
universal,
of life. Yeah,
most
exactly,
likely.
exactly. But like, yeah, I feel like 75% of the things that I'm hearing is that fear-based, like this is gonna end things.
Right.
So it's cool to hear, JP, your classifications, those 3 classifications, because that feels like it really gives us a good example of those are the loud, scared voices are not the only ones that are out there. There are these different categories, but I am curious to see how that loud, scared voice will continue to impact this process, or even maybe more guidelines or more guideposts, more legal and proper ways to use AI will come about because of those that will better support later audiences. I don't know. I'm curious to see what those categories manifest in the next couple years.
Yeah, I think we could probably all agree that as fast as AI is developing, I'm hoping there are also AI identifiers that are developing and ways to identify the content that was created with AI. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of those great tools right now. I remember when Sora dropped, literally the same day, I saw some influencer on Instagram or TikTok talking about how, they said the date out loud and said, from this day forward, you can never trust any video that you see on the internet. It's like, okay, well,
all right.
Have you been trusting everything you've read on the internet up to this point?
Yes. Right.
You've missed the point. Yeah. Is it easier now to fake some videos? Yeah, probably. Are we going to get to the point within the next year or two where politicians are just saying things that on video that they absolutely never said, and that's going to be used to affect, who people vote for and everything? Absolutely. It's going to do all of those things, which is, again, why I think it's really important to find those AI identifying tools. But I think, to go along with what JP was talking about, it goes very along with, I think, what we've talked about in this podcast multiple times about the difference between developing your skills and developing your taste, right? And it's very important to develop your skills as a creator. That's how you get to the point of being able to create things that people actually want to look at, or whatever. I guess not always necessarily, but that is really the floor, right? That's the floor of what you're able to create. The ceiling is dictated by the taste, right? And that holds the same for AI generation as well. Making sure that you are constantly being inspired, creating things that inspired you, surrounding yourself by things that inspire you, and learning those new things. That's how you're going to be able to, whether you use AI or not, create things that are still meaningful and create things that, still help develop you as a creator. I know one of the things that we want to talk about, I don't know if we'll do it quite yet, is, like, practically speaking, how do you actually do that? Right. So, like, I'm curious for Nick and Zach. You're both primarily video people. I do video, I'm more animation, but I do video on the side. How would you use a tool like Sora's not available? I guess I should say that right now. Sora is currently in the hands of red teamers, which are, to go back to our podcast a couple episodes ago with Mike, red teamers are hackers that are specifically primed to try to break it, to try to make it do things that it should not be able to do. I don't think I have to list out examples of the things that video generation bots should not be able to do. I think we can all agree there are things that it should not be able to do. So there are people trying to break it, and they're trying to build better safeguards to have that in place. Once those are in place, it'll be available to everybody. Once it's available to everybody, I know Blackbar already has an OpenAI subscription because I use ChatGPT on the daily. Nick and Zach, how would you expect to use something like this if it functions exactly as it does right now when you get it?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. One thing that I'm already thinking of, in terms of AI generation and stuff, I think the B-roll, like Zach said, is going to be a big part. But what I'm hoping a feature we'll see is removal of stuff, right? So we already have, like, in Photoshop, the option to be able to select something or remove something. AI is doing a fantastic job of that, specifically in Photoshop. What I want to see, and it kind of goes back to what I mentioned about how I think this will be utilized specifically in the wedding filmmaking industry. when you're at a venue and there's trash cans all over the place, and maybe they're full of all kinds of things, or there's something in frame, maybe someone raises their arms with their phone and it's getting in the way of the shot, right? I think these are really good, practical, and effective ways to retell the story of something like a wedding that isn't necessarily dipping into inauthenticity. It's more trying to present the most clean version of that event, right? So I'm excited for that because the number of times I've seen someone put a phone up to take video or a photo, like at the most important part of a wedding ceremony, has been way too often.
Yeah.
So I think AI would be a great way to help reduce some of those things and help make live events in the post aspect of it look cleaner, look better, and help preserve people's memory in a way that isn't necessarily full of these extraneous things.
Interesting. So using video more as a generative fill, but in the video context option. That's interesting. Let's just hope they get hands figured out so that, like, if you're taking the phone out of the person's hand, that there's not just this like mutilated like 16 finger hand just sitting in the audience.
There's just a lot of Nephilim.
Video.
There's
It's
a
really big
thumbnail
fan of
on the palm. Yeah. Oh, man.
I don't remember that 16-eyed person at my wedding. Yeah, I mean, I think I already kind of like touched on that. Like, I think like if I need, if I'm doing a sermon series bumper talking about, I don't know, the teachings of Paul or something like that, and I want to see like these wide sweeping shots of the landscape as I imagine it, or maybe like we even saw in the Sora feature that beautiful landscape shot of a beach with a house on the mountain. I think something like that is like so easily accessible. Like no longer do I have to I'm thinking of like a Hillsong. They did one of their sermons in Ireland once. So no longer do we have to fly to Ireland to grab a bunch of B-roll. Now I can just generate it in Sora. So certainly that's an expense feature that I think will help once it continues to be refined. But again, at the core, it's not going to replace taking my pastor to Ireland and filming him. Like I would be, I'm going to be very surprised if and when that happens. I don't know. That's when I think my mind is going to be blown by something like this. Like my mind's blown, but like there's still so many restrictions that I just don't see the need for people coming on site to capture your content, to capture your like Lifehouse. I can't use Sora to generate exactly what Lifehouse looks like and get all the 60 B-roll shots that I need on a Sunday. It's just not practical. It doesn't make sense. I don't see that being possible. Again, we'll see when. Caleb, you were playing a little bit with that new animation tool we talked about a few weeks back, recreating your living room in that space, and that was really impressive. But even then, there were so many gaps that were missing to really make that legitimate. So yeah, very cool tool. I think, Nick, that's going to be the best use of it, and it'll give a whole new light to fix it in post, right? we always say fix it in pre. Don't do the fix it in post mentality, but it's going to be more possible now. So, JP, I'm curious. You don't sit as much in the media field of things. I'm curious. Do you feel like, I don't know, do you feel threatened by this? Do you feel excited by this? What is your own personal take on the emergence of this kind of technology?
Oh man, I mean, for me, I see it, again, in a cycle of the democratization of information, and we're always going to have these cycles. I think with each increasing iteration. So you go back to say the printing press, and then which is originally movable type. Automatically, you have pamphlets not by the person who they say they're by being distributed in other regions of the country, and then we get controls in that. We get imprimaturs that are stamps and seals and signed that help sort of validate and verify that. We see that over and over again throughout time. But I do think that with each increasing iteration, the power grows. And while I'm not an alarmist, I do think there's a real concern. And we're in the downswell of that tension where I think initially, people are better at doing bad things than good things for some reason. We're just, and people will find, even though we've got, I didn't know there was a red team. I learned something new today. Life goal. Excellent. I wish I would have been on red team.
Right.
That sounds great. That sounds like so much fun. I mean, what a great job, try to do bad things for pay, but, and it's for good. So, but I just think there's going to be people who are going to use it illegitimately. And the hard part is like, we always get excited about these things. Like now everybody has access.
Yeah.
I go back to I'm old. I go back to the steam press, 1812. For the first time, we can print books cheaply, and everybody's like, "Sweet!" Everybody can write their book and have it distributed. Now we would do self-publishing, would be the new iteration of that, and there was, it also led to the mass distribution of what passed for porn at the time, and so on and so forth. And all that had to be like dialed in, and the stakes go up with every new one. And I think the stakes are pretty high here. And I think we're going to need to get a handle on how we authenticate these things pretty quickly, or we are going to have some significant challenges. And I just think the stakes are higher because the medium is so persuasive. It can spread so quickly.
Yeah.
And, the whole viral phenomena, that for you guys is almost your entire lifetime. To me, still seems like a new thing, but it is unbelievable how quickly one piece of false information can dominate a whole narrative. And so I think, the timeliness of getting a hold of that, it is a little bit, alarming is the wrong word, but it has deep concern for active conflicts. And I think about Israel and Palestine, ways which things have already been used, dial that up with fake video, let alone recanned video, which is what they're using now. And there's concerns for sure. I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with to help us figure that out.
Yeah. So by the vibe you're emitting, you don't want to be scanned into Sora to be used as like a theological body double. Is that something that
I mean, I do. I feel conflicted.
Conflicted, for sure.
Also, can I get some body enhancements? Is that a possibility? So like six pack, or something.
The
like that.
number one thing that people ask me at video shoots is, can you take off 10 pounds? And now you might actually be able to do that. Now, I'm curious. We haven't heard from you, Caleb. I know you've played a lot with this kind of stuff. I think probably the most of the three of us. What do you like? I feel like you've got some practical things that you've done with. I mean, you've been most active with AI, practically. I think so.
I use it quite a bit. I've been using a lot this week, actually, not in image generation in ChatGPT. Before I do the practical thing, though, I do want to say in terms of the potential issues of harm that can come from it. I think it was just a couple weeks ago, I saw this image. I was floating through Reddit. I didn't realize what subreddit I was on. It's not a bad picture. It's going to be fine. But this is an image of the Louvre on fire, taken from an iPhone pic. Like, that just looks like an iPhone picture. Even I'm someone who photoshops for a living, right? Yeah. And that absolutely would be convincing right off the front. There were some other ones that were generated by the same user.
Jeez.
Right? Like, that is absolutely and totally convincing. And then when you compound this sort of technology and ability mixed with people who have agendas along the lines of, what JP was talking about, and all of the different reasons you might want to make someone upset. Wow. It's not hard to see how important it is that we have tools as soon as possible to be able to identify things that are AI generated or not.
Wow.
That's
crazy.
It's a big deal. All that being said, here's how you can use it right now.
Get in before the tools are in place.
Right, exactly. I have a client I do some work for, a church down in Baltimore, Trinity, shout out, that I was working on their Easter stuff a couple weeks ago. And usually how it works with that client and several of my other clients, they send me just a giant Dropbox of, these are things we're inspired by. This is the vibe that we're going for. And one of the things that they sent me this year was this image. They never mind the people in the front. I don't know who these people are. But the image of the background, they really loved this like flower aesthetic that's going on. And I spent probably 25 to 30 minutes searching around iStock Photo and Unsplash of trying to find this very specific vibe of flower. It's not quite a photo. It's not quite a screen print. It's very much like illustration. As someone who lives in an 1860s house, this looks like the wallpaper that is in many of the rooms that I have yet to rip down, right? But how am I going to find something like that? I was looking around, and even the stuff that I did find was expensive. And then I like slapped myself in the face, like, well, stupid. You have Midjourney, right? So I spent probably 20 minutes in Midjourney. Well, I started with an orange color over here, ended up switching to green, but almost immediately started getting results in the style that I was looking for here. And you can see all the different iterations that I'm going for. And all I did was vintage print of a bouquet of flowers on a solid green background. And the nice thing about Midjourney is like there are no, after you pay your subscription here, like you own this photo. You could do with whatever you want with this photo. You could sell this photo if you really wanted. You can use it in your designs, whatnot. So, I eventually got a handful of pictures that I was happy with. And with a little bit of design, slapping that on top, I was able to use these and copy that exact look. So I'd say, at least in my world as a graphic designer, as someone who does a lot of animation and motion graphics, the main way that I use these image generation bots is literally like what you guys were saying. It is a stock photo replacement tool, where instead of both of these images costing me, sometimes $30-40 a pop, it cost me $30 to generate effectively unlimited content every single month. You do have to be, careful with it. Sometimes it can get you things that like you got to be careful with something like flowers. Like if it gets a stem wrong or something like that, it's not going to be the end of the world. You need to be careful of human anatomy and everything. Sometimes it doesn't do as good of a job on. Another example that I had, where's Discord here, is for ideation. So I had a client a couple weeks ago.
Ignore all the D&D content in between.
Yeah, there's plenty of that. For a company that does cremation services. They're called Eden Cremation Services, and they wanted a tree, the Eden, the tree in their logo and whatnot. So I just started generating a bunch of just trees in circles and seeing what I liked and what I didn't like, and just trying to pull inspiration from it. This was, of course, after also looking at things like Dribble, also looking, on Reddit and Behance and a bunch of other places. But the thing that I came up with ended up being, Eden Cremation Services. It's a fire, but it's also that tree there as well. Was absolutely inspired by, like, it's not hard to see where some of the inspiration came from with some of these bits, right? And I think that's like a totally reasonable, easy way to use this as just like a sounding board to throw your ideas out there and really quickly, almost like having sub-assistant designers that are just chucking ideas at you. So
imagine if like Sora imitated this format where you send out multiple versions, you can refresh, you can update. I mean, that would be, would be really impressive.
I'll tell you guys, literally today, we have a Blackbar photo shoot later tonight where I use ChatGPT-4's image creation to kind of generate some ideas of framing for the photos that we're going to be taking
like a shot
for the
sheet,
brand.
essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think, these are great ways to use AI.
Yeah, and definitely in that storyboarding sort of thing. I know how many times we've cut videos together before we've even gone to shoot at an event or something, because we know how long the video is going to be. We know approximately what shots we're going to need. We can now just AI generate those shots and then just replace them when we get the real one, and you're good to go. So a lot of really cool practical ways to use this tool right now. Don't use it to tell people things that aren't true. I feel like that's
because we can't stop you yet.
Because we can't stop you, so we're just asking nicely for right now.
That's right. I'm sure it'll be fine.
It'll be. Yeah, I'm sure we can trust people to do the right thing. That's what the Bible says. All right. Why don't we move on to our next topic today?
Yes. Yeah. So you guys have been seeing recently that they had this hearing in DC. They brought, I think, Snapchat or Snap, Discord, which was interesting to see, Meta, Twitter, X, I think another social media platform as well, TikTok. Basically had a giant hearing where, and if you watch this, it's basically a long session where all these people, mostly Zuckerberg, is being berated by congressmen. And so it's been an ongoing thing, but it certainly raised some really good questions. And, the bigger question here of like, is social media really good for society as a whole. And I know that we posted to our Discord community and to our socials concerning, how do people feel? And we got a 61% voted that it was a no, not good for society overall. And we had 39% who said yes, that it is good.
And it's worth noting we're also this is a group of people who follow us that probably all to some capacity use social media for a living, right?
Yeah.
If we were going to get any sort of charitability on here, it would be the people who follow us.
Yeah. And we had a huge discussion. I mean, like I think it's still ongoing in our Discord community, talking about the merits, what is positive and what's not positive about social media. And so I know for myself, I feel like my opinion changed multiple times during the course of that thing, where I'm like, oh, of course it's good. There's good that happens online.
That's a great point.
Right?
That's a good point.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of valid things. And I feel like I've come to the conclusion that social media as a whole, because there's a lot of social media, not all of them are the same, right? Not all of them can be weighed the same even. Certain organizations have different motivations and different audiences, and they leverage those things differently. But as a whole, social media, I have to say my conclusion is I'm not sure anymore.
That's an honest answer. I think that's totally fair.
JP, good thing we have an
curious.
Expert today.
Yeah. When we came up with this topic in our planning meeting, I think my first thought was we need to have JP on. I'm curious what he has to say about this topic.
JP, you've been on social media for a while now. You've encountered probably the best and the worst of what Facebook and other platforms have had to offer.
Well, I suppose so. I don't know about the worst. I've seen some people like, wow, that was painful. I think these things are really difficult. You're right. I don't even know if the answer is I don't know. I think the answer is it's complicated, and that's true. That there are tensions at play. Truth. I think often when we even use the word true, and we'll talk about this maybe in a second, but we talk about that in the Western tradition. Like we make true something that is true and truth synonyms, and they're not synonyms. Truth lies at the nexus of everything that is true, lies at the center of everything that is true. And so one true thing in isolation is a lie when it's not held in context with the rest of everything else. So I only say that to say this issue, I think anyone who says it's bad or it's good is making a little bit of a logical leap from true to truth. And we need to be talking in nuance and complexity about these things. And the fact is that it exists. So no amount of us, chest thumping about saying, it's bad is going to make it go away. So we have to understand it. We have to think about it in that context. For me, I guess I just think about like two basic divisions. There's the context into which it comes, which is us, this society that we're in, and there's some problems there that we can chat about if you want. And then there is the object itself, and which has its own goods and bads. I mean, a knife with no handle is a problem, but it's a problem that can be solved, right? So there are things that we can talk about with the mediums themselves. For instance, Twitter adding the ability to actually have some kind of comment and feedback and course correction. I think it was a significant step forward for Twitter. We saw that work out really, really well, in my view anyway, when Tucker Carlson went to Russia. And he makes this claim and he says, I'm the only person who is willing to talk. And Putin's own spokesperson gets on and in the comments is like, wrong answer. We've actually been approached by all of these other news organizations. So that's an example where we had a knife with no handle and Twitter was like, we should really put a handle on this, and that was a good move. I'm not for or against Twitter. I'm just saying that's a good example of fixing the tool. Yeah. But no amount of fixing the tool, I don't think automatically augments and changes the context into which that tool comes. And there, I think we've got some significant challenges that we can talk about if you want to.
Yeah.
I would definitely agree. I can see a lot of analog already into our conversation with AI as a whole and social media as a whole. And I know even as I spent the past week or so thinking about it, and I guess the last decade living it, the more and more I think about the problems of social media, my mind, although yes, I do think to some extent the platforms are to blame. Most often the people are the genesis of the problem, and the platforms are just built to hack the psychology of the things that our brain wants, whether that's for the good or for the bad, to make money. For the most part, that's the ultimate goal. Welcome to capitalism. That's sort of the job of these tools.
It always comes back to capitalism.
Wrong podcast,
guys. But I do definitely think it is a mix. It is the tools themselves, and it is the societal problems and the brain chemistry that we have and the fallen nature that we have that are being utilized by multi-billion-dollar corporations to fuel an engine that makes them loads and loads of money and gives them tons and tons of control. And so whether or not totally good or totally bad, I might be also conflicted on that front. I don't know if I'm ready to give an answer yet. Zach, what are you feeling?
I mean, I was really excited to engage with the Discord conversation. I probably typed more than I should have, but I wanted to be really articulate. And one of the statements that someone, because I took the pro stance for is social media good or bad, and we all know it's more nuanced than that. And most folks in our Discord that engaged actually were leaning toward the bad, the toxic, the unhelpful. Right. And I think one of the counter perspectives that someone said in response to one of my things was social media amplifies each one of us. I think maybe Greg may have said something along those lines. And like believing what we do about our faith and about our theology and knowing we have like that sin nature, right? I think recognizing that the worst that we're seeing on social media is simply just the amplification of the worst that's within us. Organizations and companies, they're not creating social media for necessarily social purposes. Like we've seen it, even one of our most recent conversations about is social media really social anymore? We've seen a move away from that because the money is moving away from that. And I think I think my perspective is we're just seeing the amplified outcome of who we are and what we're truly going for. And I mean, to answer the original question, I'm an optimist, so I will always lean toward the potential good that could come from something. However, I absolutely am hearing all the things that we heard from our community this week of like, there's some really bad stuff connected to social media. And I think it's very hard to ignore that. I guess I just don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater that like, there's some really good things that I've seen in my own life. Like I made a list, and we can get more into this in Blackout today, but like a list of like the positive good that was done in ways that I believe only would have been able to help that person in that moment in that social space. It's like just because social media is bad does not remove God from moving in the digital space. And I think that's the element that I want to make sure is the asterisk on the response, because we can't miss the good because of the bad, unless if you guys think otherwise. Does the bad outweigh God's potential of working on the platform of the internet, right? That's a larger conversation.
This illustrates the nuance, I think, perfectly, because I think one of the things that's really made social media difficult, in my mind anyway, is the breakdown of the family table. So the family table is where we used to learn how to have constructive dialogue. People agreed and disagreed. Everyone needed to wait and hear people's complete thoughts. You got to respond when someone was done. And at the end of the day, your family, like you have to walk away and still love one another. And there's this like central space. And to the first part, you said, yes, it amplifies us. So the dysfunction in the home just gets blown up and amplified there. So there's the negative, right? The positive of that is when you have someone that's in a home where there is no safe space for them, we could go through the story after story where someone found their safe space in social media. And so there's a perfect illustration of like, on the one hand, all of the dysfunction flows out of this same area, which it can actually be used to help solve on the other end of it. And I just don't think we're ever going to get away from that complexity of it. And And we're going to have to figure out as Christ followers and faith communities, how do we as organizations and individuals actually faithfully work inside of that, which, my experience, I can't speak for everybody's. I've got an anecdote of one life, mine. But my experience is that it hasn't gone well, at least at the individual level thus far.
Yeah, I think so when I think about the downsides of the internet and social media and how divisive everything has become, it's hard not to think about that through the lens of our American political system, since that's sort of what we're all surrounded in. And I know the negative feelings and ideas about one's opposite side are worse than just about that they've ever been, in terms of their perspective of either the moral ability of the opposing side or whatever. And social media is most often to blame for that thing, because we talk about echo chambers, right? We talk about the algorithm wants to keep you online. It wants to keep you angry because that seems to be the most effective tool, the most effective emotion at keeping people engaged. And my anecdote, my experience, that is absolutely the case. My Facebook is a cesspool, and I just deleted it because all it was doing was making me mad all the time. But what I do think is pretty interesting, though, is that if we look social media, we look before all of that came online. Generally speaking, research has shown that people were far more insular and worked in far more solidified echo chambers in their local communities, right? When I think about just my local church growing up, or the friends and family that I had, we were pretty much ideologically aligned across the whole spectrum, right? And that did, of course, there was perspectives of people who believed otherwise and, weren't a big fan, but it's way worse now, even though online, although yes, there are echo chambers, I am still absolutely exposed to people with people who have different perspectives of me. The echo chamber isn't as solidified as it used to be. And yet people are more divided now than we've ever been. And I do think, JP, to some extent, it is connected to what you were talking about. When we go from the village of 50 people or of 100 people to 7 billion people, right? It's so much harder to grasp a concept of empathy, to grasp the concept of those pixels equate to humanity on the other side of that. And that benefit of the doubt, the hearing someone's entire statement out entirely before I go to respond, is harder to do on that level of scale. And I think when I think back to the best experiences I've had on social media and the times that when it's been most positive and life-giving to me, they are the intimate conversations with limited groups of people. They're not on Twitter or X or whatever they want to call it. They're not on Reddit, not even necessarily on Facebook. There are things like Discord for me personally. There are things like DMs with my friends on Instagram and whatnot. Those insular, personal, small group of people conversations where empathy is easier to achieve with someone that it's just me and them having that conversation. I think personally, the issue of scale with human psychology is just something we're not used to doing. And I do think it's a huge part of the problem with why we're so divided and the negative.
Do you think we can break that? Let me the reason I ask is, y'all familiar, Dunbar's number? Does that mean anything to you?
Our audience may not know, so why don't you explain that?
So roughly speaking, Robin Dunbar's research basically says, human brains just in the 125 to 225 range. 150 people seems to be about the sweet spot, and there are circles inside of that. And he goes through all kinds of research. That the average village, both in Africa at one time and in rural England at one time, was 150 people. They tended to break then, and he goes through in sequences how weddings and just we seem to be really comfortable with navigating about 150 kind of tier 3 relationships where we know these people, we like these people. When we see them, we can interact with them at some level of familiarity. And for most of us, once we get to that point, if some new people come on, some people have to be bumped off. And from a theological standpoint, we might ask the question, is that because there's a certain human capacity there to actually be effective at that level? By the way, statistically speaking, and this is an old data, so I'd love to see if there's updated, but it used to be that churches in that 150 to 250 range that were healthy actually gave statistically more, they shared their faith statistically more, and had higher levels of involvement. Big enough to have energy to do something, small enough for everybody to have relationship. Again, there's ups and downs. I've been involved with churches larger and smaller than that have been great. But I wonder, is that just something in the human code? Were we meant to absorb trauma from 8 billion people?
Right.
Can we weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice for the 8 billion people? Is that even in the realm of human possibility? Or is that something where we're really taking a tool, we're taking a fire hose and trying to use it as a drinking fountain and wondering why we're drowning?
Interesting.
I don't know.
JP,
Is the answer.
I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. You're so great.
As you're talking this direction, I start to think of down the line of like parasocial relationships. So like relationships that we form, like I think of like Billie Eilish, for example, a pop superstar who has been around the world and probably has a lot of money, has won a lot of awards. There are so many people who believe they have a personal and intimate relationship with Billie Eilish, and there is no space in which she can share that. Like, if you're talking tiers, like they're not even in the tier 3 category, likely. So like, I can't imagine the psychology of someone in that position in which they have millions and millions of followers. Like, you said 150 to 200, like above and beyond that to that capacity just doesn't seem sustainable. Like there's no wonder why so many people that are like Hollywood superstars who go into, who fall into addiction, who fall into familial problems, who fall into depression, like no wonder they can't handle that input. Like it's not meant to be for that one person to handle all of that focus.
But I think even along those lines, Instagram, Billie Eilish or whatever she's posting on her Instagram stories or whatever, Instagram also now has the close friends feature that whenever you're posting on Instagram, you can choose whether you're posting it to all 12 billion or however many people she has on her thing. Probably not 12 billion. I don't think there's 12 billion people. And then
I'm following her with multiple accounts. So.
Right, fair enough. They're all bots. Or just her close friends. I know I use my close friends story 10 times more than my regular ones because I like having clients. I posted everything that I did. Probably wouldn't. But it's just... It's having that smaller, personal, like localized thing. And JP, you asked, can we fix that? I think it is the issue of, although the smaller group, I think, is better for people where they can identify closely and have these connections and whatnot. I think the engines that are driving these machines, it's way easier to make money off of 6 billion people than it is 150, right? It is always an issue of wanting to grow as fast as possible and driving the addiction that comes with engagement, comes with likes and comments and shares and whatnot. We also see, I know, Nick and Zach and I can also scream from the heavens about how awesome Discord is as a tool and how much success and how life-giving that has been for us. Discord has yet to turn a profit. They are surviving off of just
probably
capital
Nitro,
investment constantly. They are constantly taking money in. They have not yet made money, and they're still trying to figure out how to be sustainable. Otherwise, the money's going to run out at some point, right? As opposed to something like
buy Nitro.
By Nitro. I was about to use Twitter as an example. That's probably not a good example of a successful social media platform that's making
probably
a lot of money.
Not with the time we have left today.
Right, but when we think about Meta, right, and it is just when I think about Facebook when I first joined it, and it was only my friends and versus what it is now in the algorithm that we have. It has only gotten bigger and bigger and more expansive and showing me more and more people that I don't know and I've never met because they either say things that Facebook knows that I will agree with or that I will strongly, absolutely want to rip my head off reading, which usually it's a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know, is capitalism the problem, JP? Is
Oh my gosh. Keep going.
You know what's funny? You mentioned it, Caleb, because I and these things do go circles, don't they? Because
right.
you mentioned like at your sort of family, there was not a lot of misalignment in how people saw things, and that wasn't really my experience at all. And so maybe I have a personal narrative problem there.
Sure.
My own personal family was pretty open to new ideas. With our kids, and I have a 21-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 15-year-old. And, we had one go through a pretty significant stint with Marx. And so we read Marx, and we talk about it, and there's good and there's bad. And we celebrate the fact that I have a 15-year-old who wants everyone to have what they need to live. Like, that's a good thing.
Right.
And I think, so do these become mutually reinforcing problems where it's like the narrowness of the family table now is actually being reinforced by the inflammatory nature of the social media. So we weren't good at the social media because the family table broke down. And now the social media is making the family table even more disruptive when we do try to have meaningful conversations. We certainly have experienced that in some, extended friend and family relationships where it's like, wow, this person is no longer capable of just treating another person like a human in person because of how they've been shaped by their online experience. So it's coming back the other way. We're getting, the wave has left the beach and has now come back into the ocean.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe along that front, I know it's already 12:56, and so this is going to bleed over to blackout.
Into our,
most of our
we go over. It's
most of our comments that we have from the community are about this topic anyway. I know there were two things that we could probably run circles around the whole problem for hours. There's 2 points I really would love to talk about today. The first one is, I think we can all agree social media is probably a mix, right? There are some tools, there's some huge advantages to social media, and there are huge detriments to how it's working. Maybe for the sake of the huge advantages to social media, how can we as church media professionals, as Christians who know how to work the internet and have phones, what is the best use of our time to use the positive aspects of social media for the kingdom? What does that look like? JP, do you have any ideas?
I mean, I do. The problem is different people are going to give different answers to that. I think there are some people that are probably going to think my answer would maybe even equate to compromise or something like that. I guess I think back to over the last number of years where immediately people have wanted to line people up, and whether that was racial issues, whether that was political issues, whether that was, revolved around COVID or whatever it was, very, very quickly everyone wanted to line people up, figure out which side you're on and shoot. I mean, that was kind of the way it went. And for me, I felt like, and I'm not saying that I did this effectively or anything like that, but I'm thinking, okay, I'm connected to a lot of different people in a lot of different churches. And who I'm concerned about personally are those people who are like, I don't feel comfortable with either of those. I really didn't know that I signed up for a war. I'm still learning. I think to claim certitude is to claim omniscience, and it's idolatry. So that's just me. So this idea that I'm 100% confident about enough to shoot other Christians is just not kind of where I'm at as a person.
Yeah, man.
So I felt this call, I guess I would call it that, to just sort of like say, all right, I'm a big boy. My family loves me. I'll take the middle road and let some people shoot at me, and that's fine. But if it lets other people who are also walking the middle road know that there are other people also walking the middle road and that they're not alone, so that's a very personal level. That's not a corporate level.
Yeah,
that's not something the college I was affiliated with did or anything like that. That's just me as a person. But I think there are those ways in which we can ask who is out there that doesn't know that there are other people there for them and that are on the same journey with them. I think that's one thing we can do. Now, again, like I said, I'm fully aware that as I articulate that, there are those people on both sides who just go, so that's compromise, and I get that. And we're just at kind of an impasse there. I don't really know what to do with
that really resonates with me. Like being a bridge builder, like that feels like something that is not
peacemaker even.
Yeah, peacemaker, exactly. Like that seems like something that is worth the time investment. Like I know it sounds like JP, you and I are similar on that front. Like Caleb's talked about recently about like his life purpose, and I feel that bridge building, that peacemaking, is very central to my own being. It sounds like that resonates with you as well.
For sure.
Like I think that there's a way for love and loving people like Christ and relationship in Christ-based community can be bridge building without compromise. And I think if we can work toward that, I think I mean that seems like a good objective. And having social media be a bridge builder feels like a way to successfully use it, at least for myself.
Yeah, for sure.
I think when I think about the good aspects of social media and the tool, obviously I'm going to go back to, I mean, we've talked about the concept of the digital missionary a billion times on this podcast and our videos. And I'm seeing similarities with some of the things we talked about today and the strategies that we've talked about of what are effective online. And there's a huge part of being that digital missionary of like finding what it is about, you know, your interests, your belief, the things that tie you with other people, identifying niches or effectively subcultures, effectively insular communities that are online, and identifying it, that's going to be my audience. I think perhaps a huge advantage, a huge like good thing that churches can do or Christians can do online is to build those 150 person communities online, like build a safe space, not entirely of Christians or entirely, you know, people who believe exactly the same way you do, preferably not of that. But for me, you know, the example I've used before, it was Nerf guns, modifying Nerf guns, right? And that was all of a sudden I was a community of a couple dozen people that we got to, it was a small enough group that I could empathize with them. It was a small, we could have real conversations. And when the time came, they were able to truly, really hear me out on what it was that I believed and what did my church believe. And if there was a place for them in that scope, right? So perhaps a hugely effective tool that, you know, and I do think, again, we've said this before, but individual Christians are going to be the people to figure this out before churches will, right? If individual Christians with a passion to evangelize, with a passion to talk with people who do not believe the same way, intentionally build out communities with shared interests or shared perspectives or whatever that is, and use that insular small community to build out relationships that eventually could lead to evangelism, could lead to discipleship, lead to people meeting Jesus, the one before. I think the success rate of targeting down a niche, building out that group, as opposed to just blast mass media, you know, posting John 3:16 every 30 seconds on every wall that you can find.
I thought that was banned on social media.
Oh, right.
John 3:16.
Yes, right, yes.
I shared it and it got taken down immediately. So
that's what I've been hearing. That Facebook, you know, regardless, I think that's a hugely effective use of our time and use of the power of digital media. And I think Discord's one of the best places to do it, despite its name. Unfortunately,
who'd have thought Discord would be with the place where most discourse happens? And
so maybe just to land out like the podcast segment of this, the last question we were kind of answering was like, how can we properly serve those who are experiencing the worst of social media? It's not just what can the church do, but how do we serve those who are experiencing the worst?
I think
what do we mean by the worst? I want to make sure I answer the right question.
Yeah, so maybe those that are experiencing bullying, maybe those who are experiencing abuse, maybe those who are experiencing, they are going to social media as a way to fill the void, and that void is not being filled. In fact, it is actually being widened because their experience is so detrimental, toxic, and negative to their experience that they are deteriorating in their own mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health. Like we see strategies. I mean, we have seen statistics about youth specifically. Like that's a really easy conversation to talk about. Youth health and social media really associate. We see statistics that are saying youth health is deteriorating largely because of social media. What do we do for the people whose health is being detrimentally hurt and impacted by that?
I mean, as a parent, it was interesting to me. I feel like if you're a smart person, a wise person, you become the student at some point in your life because you're not the person driving the culture. And you want to ask, like, hey, I'm still sucking in air. Like, how can I be a help? That means I need to shift into student mode. And listening to my sons, one thing that came up over and over again in our conversations that was really, I'll say, distressing to them, was the way in which in general terms, but at a large scale, the kind of deafening silence that was there from the church in like strategically, intentionally discipling people's usage of social media during those few years that were so difficult. Yeah. It was really distressing to my sons to hear the truth claims of God's love from the church, knowing that the only job of the church is to make people in Christ's image, to disciple people, and then to watch the just destruction that was allowed to happen both between each other and to our own witness without with few exceptions, hearing someone stand up and say, for the next 4 weeks, like, we are going to talk about discipleship in this area, and we're going to be clear, moving over into this area, this is sinful, this is destructive, it is the world. I don't care whether what you're saying is true. The world isn't a statement of truth or falsehood. It's a way of engaging truth and falsehood. And this is worldly, and we don't approve of it. There's something wrong when we have a whole group of people who can behave so poorly all week and then walk into church. I'm not a big fan of the emotion shame, but not feeling any sense of like, I have not behaved well this week, and now I have to face up to people. That doesn't even cross their mind, because the way they have engaged feels legitimate. And there was a grand failure of discipleship in that. I think that was very, very problematic. And I think it would have been super helpful for my sons and myself too, but I just think particularly the next generation, for them to hear someone stand up and say, this is not okay. And we're going to take the lead on this. And we're going to be clear, this is sinful. And I think that would have been, for those who were on the downside of it, just hearing that legitimized that what happened to you was wrong is a big first step. I don't know. That's just me, but
I think what you're saying, JP. I mean, I'm. It's something that I know I've thought a lot about myself too, and even just thinking like, there's. Some of it came up last week when we were talking with Dan DeRogers about the Super Bowl commercial that went out. Caleb. Thank you, Zach. Yeah. And even there was part of like the discourse online between Christians, like, there's a lot of vitriol between people, regardless of which position you're on. It's almost as if like, this new media.
We're behaving like the devil, arguing about whether a commercial is like Jesus. It's just
right?
Yeah, it's rich for sure.
I think all of us can certainly, I think, identify. I know the three of us have being close friends. We can identify with your sons in that. Now it's called deconstruction, right? There wasn't a word for it when we started doing it, of realizing like, hey, this seems kind of trash that we've been doing our entire lives, right? And fortunately, that deconstruction came with a lot of reconstruction for all of us. And I'm not sure how much I love those terms in general, but I do think that the polarization that we've seen across political lines, which unfortunately often are also across religious lines, in that capacity, they are amplified by social media. They do create extra insular chambers, echo chambers. They do create more divisiveness, and especially to think about a church that is full of people that are coming to church on Sunday morning, like you were talking about, happy and excited to be there, doing the thing that they know that, they believe, at least, like, this is what's going to get me into heaven, all the while feeling nothing but hatred for people who are right outside the door, right?
Sometimes inside the doors.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. Absolutely. It is.
They will know us by our love, right?
Right. Even as someone who, I'm someone who's born and raised Assemblies of God. I've been there my entire life. They will always be my family. Me and the Assemblies of God do not agree on everything theologically. Very much do not agree. If the 16 fundamentals were a test, I would be failing that test. There's no question, right? But I'm just not going to talk about that at church. There's no reason why I would bring that up at church, because I know if everybody knew, like, I know that, like, people wouldn't want to affiliate with me. There'd be people asking for my membership to be revoked, right? And I'm not saying that of my church specifically, but just like as a general, like, church, capital C, right? And I do wonder for churches, when we talk about having to serve the people who are most hurt by that, some of the people that are being most hurt by that are the people in the churches who don't realize how much they're being hurt by this, right? So it's almost this, there needs to be this moment of self-awareness of like, oh, wow, this is affecting me in a way that I didn't realize it was. And realistically, that it might need to be a bit of a wake-up call. But then, like, what is the solution? Is the solution, bringing back Sunday night services and we're all just going to sit around on a table and talk about stuff again? Or we're going to intentionally develop and seek ways to talk to people that we don't disagree with and have that face-to-face conversation with a spirit of empathy? Like, systematically, is there a proven method to solving this kind of thing, JP? I don't know if you've heard of anything like this. I don't know.
I mean, this is just my sense, and you can't speak generally about the entire church. It's a huge, diverse place. But I will say that the reality is that at this point we have created something that it will cost us to get it back. And by that, I mean, it's going to cost us people. If I can just use maybe a really extreme example, I have a dear friend of mine, a cultivated friend over many, many years, who works for one of the largest pro-abortion lobbies in the country. And grew up in the church, grew up in the faith. And, it was very difficult as this person kind of tried to start their journey back to the faith, because every time they started to have that conversation, it immediately gravitated toward this. Yeah. And I can just tell you, and again, I just feel like maybe there are people that would even be listening that would just push back, but just hear me for a second. This person really loves women. And that's why they're doing the work they do. Now, I disagree with the application of that work significantly. Sure. But when I question the person's core commitment to women, I'm questioning their very core, and they're immediately going to move away. And the question is, like, how do we, it's going to cost us to get back to the place where we can say to someone, hey, like, you don't need to move the person from point A at ground level to the top of Mount Everest in one moment. In fact, maybe the top of Mount Everest isn't even the goal, that we are really on journey, and that Christ is at the center, and he is, I mean, there are 8 billion people on planet Earth. We're all made in God's image. That means there's at least 8 billion different ways Christ can be embodied. My personal experience isn't the be-all and end-all. My personal understanding isn't the be-all and end-all. And you can hear, as I'm saying that, automatically there are going to be people who are going to be strongly resistant to that perspective.
Sure.
And if you're going to go that way, if you want to be more missional, if you want to, like, leave bridges up instead of burning them, you've got to make that fundamental shift as a community and say, maybe we don't quite know what to do with this person, but we're willing to like walk on that journey, and we're going to keep Christ at the center, and we're always going to turn toward Christ. But turning toward Christ looks differently depending on what road you're coming in on. Even the great, Victorian evangelical conservative Charles Spurgeon said, the approach to the cross is different for everyone. The worm has to crawl up to it and the eagle has to swoop down to it. The cross stays at the center, but the motion toward it does look different. And I just think we're going to have to build communities that are much less insistent on certitude at the margins, and say Christ, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus is the thing with which we continually are aligned. The Reformation motto, there's good and bad about the Reformation, but reformed and always reforming, right? Always making movement toward, always adjusting. Jonathan Edwards writes in there, heaven forbid, God forbid that I ever get to a place that I turn away a new idea because I'm used to thinking in another way. And that's him into his 60s and 70s, interrogating his beliefs and admitting the only thing that is stable about my faith is the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Everything else is continually being interrogated by that reality and changing. And so, and leaving space for other people in that's a messier community. You mentioned the 16 fundamentals. I mean, that's fine, whatever. We all need to have a gathering space,
Right.
Sure.
But the idea that we can take all of history and orthodoxy, all the rich tradition of the history of the church, and get it down to 16 and say, this is the ultimate articulation of the kingdom.
Right.
I've been Assemblies of God forever. I love the Assemblies of God, but and there may be people who would think differently, but I would never articulate it that way. I would say this is the 16 around which we have chosen to gather.
Yes.
But the idea that somehow God and those 16 are equivalent is idolatrous.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the definition of idolatry.
It is. So we just have to have. I mean, it's going to cost us something. We have whipped people up. A lot of our leadership in churches got a lot of vitriol over the last few years. And I said, I don't mean this as a gotcha or anything like that, but I'm like, you realize they're using the weapons you gave them. You told them it was all right to be harsh and unkind to people who believed this and who believed this and who believed this. Now you happen to believe differently than them, and they're just using the weapon that you helped them build.
Yeah.
It's so true, JP.
And I don't mean that as a gotcha or a jab or anything like that.
Sure.
But we have now created weaponized Christians, and for us to ask everyone to lay down their arms is probably going to cost us. Attendance, dollars, buildings, staff. It's like real. It's significant.
Yeah.
The certitude that you're talking about is something that the three of us talk about certainly frequently, most of the time behind closed doors, or at least in my close
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to open the closed door.
Right? No, not at all.
No, you're good.
And it's been a trend for the past several hundred years. And I think even as early as when Charles Darwin and evolution started becoming a conversation, all of a sudden there was this big scientific effort towards something that was seen as extra biblical, or at least anti-biblical. And then there was the sort of almost Puritan pushback. It was like, no, the Bible is, confidently, like our interpretation of scripture is confidently right about everything, and everything past that is sin of the devil trying to, confuse us. And all of a sudden, going way back to the very beginning of the podcast today about truth claims, it was there is certainly an absolute, there's truth in the gospel, right? Every single one of us would believe that. And there's also truth that we're finding in science. There's truth that we're finding out in the world. And the truth is somewhere confidently in the middle. And we probably will never know actually what on earth it is, right? To have anybody, I've heard it even said, I'm totally blinking on the author's name, about how he equated certitude to the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, right? To where I am confidently saying that I know absolutely what is true and what is not true. Only God is able to do that, right? And if there's one sin that is not forgivable, as what we've seen, at least in Scripture, it is that blasphemy. So but that razor's edge of defining people who believe this are correct, true, or whatever, everybody outside that, to the point of, I would argue, dehumanization of those people, right? We are happy to dispense with the mission of the Great Commission because those people are so beyond our worth it even. And we're so beyond social media at this point, but
Yeah.
social media
Hey, I love
is
it. This is
absolutely
great.
one of the tools that has
Yeah.
been used to cut that divide further and further
Yeah.
and further.
Yeah.
If I can
point out
propose,
real
like,
quick here,
just-
Zach.
Oh,
Like, sorry, just real quick. Like, I understand that, like, we've kind of diverted from social media. The thing is, the way I see it, social media, the way you present yourself online is not just an extension of yourself, it is yourself. So, maybe
Yeah.
we're not necessarily talking about, like, Facebook, Instagram, and stuff, but the way we behave online is the way we show Jesus online. And so, I think this is all relevant to what we're talking about. Zach, go ahead.
I love it. I know we're way over, but this is a good conversation, so it's okay. I was thinking there was something that kept coming to mind in the course of this conversation. When the Black Lives Matter movement was at its peak, there was someone that was a Christian activist that was sitting in the center, and one of the things they said stuck with me, and it was that we are not going to change people in droves. We will only change people's actions in relationship, in one-on-one spaces, in small, tight-knit communities. And that's the way in which they most preferred to engage with people that were on the anti-Black Lives Matter movement statements because of those relationships and those individual conversations. They were like, anything else just doesn't produce fruit. And there's a podcast I listened to a while back with Mike McHargue, one of the liturgists, and he was talking about the disgust spiral. When we disagree with someone, that starts to develop, that can evolve into disgust. Disgust evolves into distancing. Distancing evolves into dehumanization, and dehumanization evolves into demonization. So it's like there's this caution that we all have to not only, one, be willing to invest into relationship, especially with people we disagree with, but two, we have to be self-aware enough to make sure that we're not allowing disgust, which is a natural psychological phenomenon, to turn our people relationships into into things that pull us apart. And I think that's something that kind of comes to the mind in the course of the conversation today. So
I do actually think this is directly connected to social media, because there are two heresies that are baked into this, and you alluded to one of them, Caleb. One is this idea of certitude, which comes with the trajectory of logocentrism that starts, really with Gutenberg and distribution of education and public education, where if I can put it down on print, I've got it, right? I've articulated this truth, and it now becomes something that I have to defend, I have to promote, so on. And even people who I would disagree with about, lots and lots of things, like Michel Foucault, observes this extensive discursiveness ability to talk about things actually does have a little bit of a repressive core at the base of it, because it is automatically dehumanizing. I've turned myself and my views into text. It becomes discursive and objectified. And that trajectory leads us right into where we're at now, where it's like my whole statement on something as complex as, whatever it is, politics or race or life, is boiled down to a mic drop, or whatever that, like, gosh, is there any...
It's an altar call. That's
and is there just... it just is so un-Christian. And really objectifying. So you've got that logocentric trend coming, but then there is also this. I don't think Christians realize how deeply they have drunk of the cup of modernity. The idea that what I think, that the articulation of something is equal to the something. So if I believe the right thing, I have the right thing. That those two things are equal to each other, and so we believe that if we believe the right things, that equates to discipleship. And you can chart that on a graph. Believing the right things makes me a faithful Christian. And that is really sub-biblical. Text, when Jesus comes along, he's like, I am the truth. The scriptures have said all kinds of things that are true, but truth is embodied in the complexity of a person.
Right.
Or I am the Word. I have said things through the created world. I've said things through Scripture. I've been speaking to you, but I am the Word, right? I am the ultimate, because it's not text. So text is a is a reduced version of word. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
sure.
and some true statement or true idea is a reduced version of the truth, which is a person. And we have become idolaters. We have believed that the text and the true thing are more important, or maybe a replacement for the truth and the word, which is Christ. And those two things are not the same. Scripture doesn't equal Christ. True things don't equal Christ. Those things are shadows, iterations, reduced versions of him. The two aren't synonyms. So I think we've fallen for a pretty significant bait and switch with modernism, by believing that somehow if we understand Scripture perfectly, we have Christ. And you can, when the reality is the thief on the cross had no Scripture and had all of Christ.
Right.
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 So I think we get. I don't know. I think that social media feeds right into that. It's an amplification of the worst of those two idolatries. Again, there's not lots of good, but it really, really leverages pretty powerfully those two propensities. I said what I said, and here it is, and that's kind of the end of it. And then amplified by non-bodily presence, all that kind of stuff. It has some challenges. We go back to the knife metaphor. We got to get a handle on that knife,
Right?
Because it is built pretty poorly in the beginning, anyway.
Perhaps I know it's 1:26 now. We've only got 4 minutes left. So if I could put a small bow on everything we talked about today, it sounds like to me that focusing on you don't know everything and you never will. And just admitting that and acknowledging that
It's in the Bible. We see through a glass dimly, right? It's a promise of Scripture. You won't know everything.
Right. And accepting the fact that you may be wrong about some things, and there are things that of people you disagree with. There are things that they have that you can learn from, right? And then being intentional about developing relationships, both online, very obviously a tool, and in person, that are directed towards empathy, that are like Christ-centric, of trying to best understand and love people as best you can. And if both of those things were done by every Christian across the planet, the world would change overnight. It's not gonna happen, but it would. It would absolutely.
But wouldn't it be awesome?
Wouldn't it be awesome? And maybe it could just start with the little Blackbar community. Wouldn't that be fantastic?
That would be the best news.
We are very tight on time. We don't want to miss out for the blackout opportunity. So if you've got 10 minutes, maybe JP, we might just take us into a quick. You got the time window of another 10 minutes.
I'm like retired. I'm just hanging out.
Okay, sure. So we'll go ahead and end the main part of our conversation today. Head into our blackout, guys. You know what to do.
Well,
you want? Yes. Hold on. That's right.
While you guys are doing that, of course, this is Welcome to Blackout, which is a YouTube exclusive Q&A, pulling from community submitted questions, comments, feedback on Instagram, Discord, of course, from our live audience. If you're joining us right now, please feel free to contribute if you have anything or any questions or follow-ups that you wanted to hit. And of course, make sure to check out our channels, our Instagram and our Discord every Thursday before the podcast to get not only a sneak peek of the preview that we're going to talk about in the podcast episode, but also to submit any questions you have. Engage in the conversation like we had about social media this week. And of course, if you're watching live, we're going to hit your questions best that we can, prioritize them today. I wish that I could, maybe not I wish, but I feel like we should subtitle our blackouts. If I got to subtitle this blackout, it would be "Woo-wee, JP, let's go." That's what I would say. You brought some. Excited to have you on the episode today, man. Not that we don't talk theology and hermeneutics and such like that, but man, you brought some really good perspectives today, and it was cool to see the connection between the digital space and faith. yeah, I think that's just such a cool core of this entire experience. So I might go over some of our Discord feedback today. But if you guys have any initial thoughts as we're heading into Blackout, this is a lot more relaxed. So don't feel like you have to, you could take your pants off if you want. Just don't show it on camera.
Zach usually takes his pants off.
I usually my pants.
Listen.
Zach's
pants haven't been on this whole podcast. Okay.
I don't want to. Zach, why
But
don't
for
you
real,
tell
Zach,
us
are you
about
wearing
what people
shoes
have
right
said
now?
on Discord?
Of course I'm not wearing shoes. I'm in my own house.
My gosh.
Why would I wear shoes? Caleb's gonna kill me. Okay, we didn't have time in the episode, of course, to get to it. We kind of wanted to save this for the Blackout, but I wanted to first of all thank those who participated in the Discord conversation. We had Blaze, Jack, Hop, Rachel, and Greg, and then of course for those who responded on our Instagram, we had Jeremiah. The Salt community responded. John Mark Clark, a gentleman named Nick, and a good amount of people that interacted. So thank you guys for participating in those things. I just kind of wanted to bring some of the highlights of our conversation about social media because we got into it, and a majority of the people in the Discord were not. They did not feel hopeful about social media.
It was a busy conversation about just this topic.
And I love that. That's exactly what we're looking for in this conversation. There's so much nuance, a lot of big perspectives. I ended up being the main pro social media person that was engaging kind of devil's advocate in the conversation. But some of the things that I saw is not only they mentioned that not only is it good or bad, but social media is detrimental. The most positive ratio about social media was 51% good, 49% bad. That was the most positive. There were a lot less positive breakdowns of is social media good or bad. And of course, we're getting into binaries there, and we talked about that in the conversation today. But I thought that was interesting. That was the most positive in a media-centric community that we're able to moderate. They were overall not excited about the value of social media. So some of the highlights, social media brings out the worst in people. It's toxic. Algorithmically driven social media is most at fault for the worst of humanity as it leverages boosting engagement on the platform over human connection. The algorithm is amoral at best, and it's driven by a company's agenda at worst. Young folks are failing to learn how to interact in the real world, and it's having a deep negative impact on the mental health of youth. Social media creates and fuels narcissists. We've lost the social to social media. It's a massive time waster or a void filler. It distills people to opinions and echo chambers, and it is actively deteriorating relationships, causing division in families, friends, and communities because of it. It amplifies the character of its users, so there we go, for better or for worse, and people do not know how to moderate it and thus overindulge, very similar to drugs, alcohol, or something that we can get addicted to. So, some interesting thoughts there, and I think we actually touched on some of them, but I'm curious if you guys have any observations or thoughts that
like it does. Fix all.
I know. A lot of stuff there, which is crazy.
Tell me how you really
interesting.
feel, right?
That's what but I love it. That's great. I'm really excited that people contributed. But yeah, guys, those are a lot of thoughts about how difficult social media is, and these are from media people.
Yeah.
If I may categorize some of this a little bit, there's a lot of conversation about the algorithms, right? Built to get you to stay on the platform and keep scrolling so we can serve you more ads and whatnot. There also seems to be a lot of conversations about specifically it being an addictive thing, right? Of it being a massive time waster. People don't know how to moderate it or moderate their use of it and whatnot. Those are the two sort of pervading things that come to mind.
JP, can you answer my list in your opinions about each item of my list verbatim as I listed them? Are you prepared to?
Alphabetical would be preferred.
I can, but I've alphabetized them.
And can you make sure that there's a Bible verse connected to the explanation of each of those answers?
I don't think any of us would probably, with some asterisks or footnotes, disagree with any of those. The question is, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
So, I mean, it's sort of like shaking your fist against the wind instead of figuring out how do we build a better sailboat. I have some sympathy with that. I do remember, when there weren't these things. But the reality is they're here. And at least, again, just speaking as a dad, our own kids, our perspective was, we got a few choices. We can rail against it, or we can just acknowledge it's a part of our world and figure out how do we help them become responsible users. And by the way, Discord for them is huge too. So that's becoming their kind of home of choice.
Yeah. I mean, that was actually the most positive note about social media. Most people, when they talked about the best experience was Discord spaces, in which the algorithm is not present, controlling what you're seeing, and you have the ability to have, exactly.
Yeah.
So that
Very
was the
quick,
most
non-adjacent
positive.
question: is Discord connected to the old punk rock label Discord? I assume not.
It is not.
I don't
Because if it was, I'd be on. But it's not.
Right.
Okay.
We can send you an invite.
Okay, send me an invite. Because if my
we'll do
friends
it.
in there, something I'd be out about it.
You could listen to Minor Threat while you.
You can. Great. Fantastic. That's good. So yeah, I mean, I just think, to me, abandoning the space is not really a very Christian thing to do. That's just not. Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. I think if the scriptures had been written today, the digital space would be on that. I mean, it is an omnipresent church. If we're called to embody God, he's omnipresent. He's already there. The question is, how do we faithfully embody God in that space? So I think abandonment is not the issue. That doesn't mean that someone who might not be struggling with addiction or something like that, maybe they should abandon for a time or something.
Sure.
But in terms of overall, Christians and Christianity shouldn't be abandoning the space, but we've got to, I just go back to the initial thing, we got to disciple our own people better. Right. And the reality is, I don't mean this negative, but I do think it's okay for people to show up on Sunday and be like, I'm kind of embarrassed about how I behaved on social media this week. And I don't think a lot of that's happening now. I think
we don't have a
that lot
space
of people,
for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
So
said
when was the
shame
last time you heard
earlier.
a pastor be like, hey, come down to the front if you need prayer because you messed up in your comment section, right?
Maybe we
Zach,
could
I
spend 10
interrupted
minutes
you
of
there.
every sermon just scrolling through a feed of only what people on
That would be so fun.
the church posted.
Wait, I got it. We scroll through the news feed of those that aren't giving.
There we go. Wait, is this
sure
are we
you
doing
tithe to
tithe
get
on the
off the
gross or
list.
not? I want to know how wide of a net we're casting here. But no, I think we have to go brass tacks, and I think we've got to actually model difficult conversations for people. I was a big fan when I was at the college. I'm a pacifist, have been from before I was a Christian, and became more of one after I became a Christian. We had another staff member who was a warmonger. No, I'm kidding. They weren't a warmonger. They weren't a pacifist. And I'm all about let's have a public conversation. Let's have a public discourse. And this other person, they were obviously on staff. They love Jesus. They're great people. We disagree on that issue. Obviously, I think I'm right, or I changed my mind. They think they're right, or they would change their mind. And we both love Jesus. Let's model constructive public discourse. But the way most of our churches are centered, denominationally, you can't even really do that because now your church is looked at as not being faithful to the denomination that it's part of.
Yeah.
And again, back to the structure thing. I think things are built to make something perfectly. Right. Every organization is making something perfectly right now.
Yeah.
And what we have in American evangelicalism is what our churches are perfectly designed to make.
Interesting.
Maybe we should change that.
Yeah. Is there, so I feel like if maybe there's one part of this conversation I don't think we've necessarily talked about today. I know we're already over time and we're going a little bit more over time, but when we talk about the addictive aspect of these things, obviously addiction is nothing new. It existed far before social media. If somehow we get past social media, it'll exist far after that, right? But I do think addiction on social media I consider it slightly different in that, when I think of people who are addicted to alcohol or addicted to drugs, the manufacturers of alcohol are generally speaking trying to make the best product that they can that people would like necessarily. But they're not, at least maybe I'm not quite pessimistic enough. I don't think generally speaking, the conversations at the top room are going to be how can we make people as addicted to our product specifically as possible? And like what addictive chemicals can we throw in here to like make it more and more and more and more, right? Maybe
you don't think at Mad Dog 2020 they're asking that question?
Okay, fair.
With the headquarters of Mad Dog.
But when I think about, social media, TikTok seems to be the easiest, dog to kick in this specific thing, where like they have seemed to develop an algorithm and develop a platform that is like mathematically, scientifically proven to be as addictive as possible. And their one function, the one thing they want more than anything is for people to be scrolling on this thing for hours at a time. And just soaking up, like that is the one thing they want, is to get people hooked. Is there like... I feel like there must be a morality conversation that has to come in place with that. And is there a moral way for Christians to engage with these kinds of platforms that are designed scientifically to addict people from the beginning? Or is abstinence a conversation
That's a good question.
worth having?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like you're tapping at that point more into the humanity of who we are, right? Does Caleb Weidman have the capacity to tell himself that has been enough video games and cut himself off?
No, he doesn't.
I mean, that feels like a discipline thing, right? That feels like we
Sure.
have to understand how to develop disciplines in our own lives. And some of the people that were talking, and to affirm them, they were talking about how they don't want to spend time on those sites for certain reasons that they discussed. And I want to
Sure,
affirm that.
yeah.
Like there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's their right. That's their privilege.
Totally.
And honestly, for them to establish healthy boundaries and guidelines that are based upon the disciplines that they observe in their own lives, like that
sure.
feels like self-awareness to me. And I mean, I don't know if we as the American culture have a good sense of healthy disciplines in general. Like, don't just stop at social media. Like America doesn't know how to. We have a consumption problem.
Moderation is not something.
Yeah,
we excel at.
moderation is not an American American ideology. So I think it's. I think social media is just showing that flaw.
Sure.
And it's enhancing it because it's the most visible thing that we're all seeing at the same time.
Yeah, there's certainly something to be said that addiction usually isn't like, it doesn't exist for addiction's sake. Usually there's some sort of other hole or vacuum or, I mean, we can talk about it being a something that people have to self-moderate. People have to have, forgetting the word, whatever, to sort of get over it. But usually social media is taking the place of a problem that they have not yet solved, or an emotional instability or trauma or whatever that they're trying to work through. And this is how they're coping with it, right? And I think all of us can make space for that part of the conversation. But I think TikTok and all these other tools are proving that they're like effective at making people addicted to this thing that don't necessarily have those vacancies and don't necessarily have the ability to self-regulate or whatever. I don't know. Is that like
they know how to fill the void, for better or for worse.
Right.
They know how to fill the void.
I could see a totally reasonable moral argument to say, like, you should not be on those platforms. We should not be supporting these platforms because they are designed explicitly to consume one's life and to create addiction, like as a fundamental. I don't know.
100%.
JP, do you have a thought on that?
I mean, I think that's probably one of those things for the individual. I mean,
Sure.
you have to be healthy enough to be the healer. And I think there are going to be people that probably are going to express a call to and a call away from, and then there are going to be those people who unfortunately use people who have a call to justify their going there when they really should be the ones who shouldn't be there. Right. And I think, like you said, we've seen that over and over again. It's an interesting question though when you get to an intensification. We could have this. I like the alcohol metaphor because I think it's we can probably all go, okay, so there's wine on your anniversary, there's so on and so forth. But at some point, when you get to something called, Nitro Drunk 3000, like it becomes a different product, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, different people are going to draw their lines different places. But the question is, like, does the Christian ever need to be drinking Nitro Drunk 3000?
Right.
Like people might draw the line other places. And the question is, like, is TikTok Nitro Drunk 3000 for social media?
Sure.
I mean,
I don't know. I don't know.
It might be the closest thing we have to Nitro Drug 3000.
If I ever start an alcohol company, I'm going the whole hog, and that will be it. Nitro Drunk 3000.
Just throw nicotine in it. You just as many addictive things as you can dump into it. Cigarettes might even be a better example. Like those, like literally has a chemical in it that is by definition addictive, right? And
FDA would never approve that product again today, but it just is what it is.
Have you? Are you a TV show fan? Or do you watch a lot of TV, JP? Like, have you seen Parks and Rec?
Yes. I have seen 1 or 2 episodes.
Okay. Well, there's this thing called snake juice in there that just sounds exactly like this. It's not FDA approved. It's a whole bit.
I'll tell you what, I want to see what Midjourney, to bring the circle it all back. What does Midjourney think Nitro Drunk 3000 looks like?
I can do some generation. I'll post it on the story later.
It should be probably either tequila or vodka, I would think. One of the two.
Something that
with energy drink in it.
Yeah.
It needs to have energy drink right in it.
There's
Right.
caffeine, there's alcohol in it, there's a little bit of crack, some the legal amount of crack.
Legal crack.
Okay,
on that note, we should probably land this blackout segment. Do you guys have any closing thoughts to land out today's conversation out so that what is it? What'd you call the alcohol drink that you created?
Nitro Drunk 3000.
If we want that to be our last thought, then so be it. That's what blackout's for.
maybe don't have any equivalent of the metaphor of Nitro Drunk 3000, and also recognize that most of the people that are drinking it regularly are probably doing it because there are other problems and vacancies and things in their life that they have not yet figured out how to do. And that's also something that the church needs to be better at serving.
You know what else is good for people to do? Therapy.
Therapy's good.
I mean, that could help fill those holes, or at least help you find the direction for those things.
You know what else is a good thing for people to do? To join the Blackbar Discord, where you can connect with other church creatives who are dealing with the same kind of garbage that you are, and addicted to the same social media platforms you are, and also playing video games and Pal World, probably specifically, as much as you are. Also,
if you want to see Nitro Drunk 3000, we'll put the pictures in the Discord.
We'll drop that in there. If you are interested in possibly having a conversation about having some work done in the media world, AI generated or not, social media or not, you can find us at blk.bar. JP, again, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a fantastic
I'm sure I'll never be back, so thanks for having me.
You absolutely will.
We would love for you to come back. Absolutely.
Right. And we hope all of you come back in 2 weeks, and we will see you then.
Woo-wee, JP!